The moment Deathworlders revealed their unrestrained strength, the broken accord doctor. Webb stepped off the transport vessel and felt his knees almost buckle. The artificial gravity on Sanctuary Prime was set to what the Stellar Collective called standard, approximately 60% of Earth's pull. After 6 months of forced adaptation training, Marcus had learned to walk carefully, to move slowly, to never show his true strength. Around him, representatives from 40 different species moved through the arrival terminal. Some floated on anti-gravity platforms. Others walked on multiple legs or slithered across the polished floors. All of them shared one thing in common. They were fragile compared to humans. Marcus adjusted his diplomatic robes and waited for his colleague. Sarah Chen emerged from the transport moments later, carrying equipment cases that should have required hover assists. She set them down gently, remembering to make the action look difficult. Her dark eyes met his for just a moment, sharing silent frustration. They had spent half a year learning to be less than they were. Less strong, less fast, less capable. It went against every instinct. A delegation approached them. The lead figure stood barely 4 feet tall with pale blue skin that seemed almost transparent. Delicate antennae waved from its head, and its forearms moved in graceful patterns as it spoke. A translation device around its neck converted the sounds into English. "Welcome to Sanctuary Prime, honored humans. I am Mediator Quillen of the Harmony Council. We are grateful you accepted our invitation to join the Stellar Collective." Marcus bowed carefully, having practiced the gesture hundreds of times to avoid moving too quickly. "The honor is ours, Mediator. Humanity has dreamed of meeting other civilizations for generations." Quillen's antennae trembled slightly, a sign of nervousness Marcus had learned to recognize. "Yes, well, we must discuss certain protocols. Your world, this Earth, presents unique challenges. The other council members are concerned." Sarah stepped forward, her voice carefully modulated. "We understand our planet's environment is more intense than most. We've completed all the adaptation protocols. We know to move carefully around other species. We know to limit our physical interactions." Quillen seemed relieved. "Good, excellent. You must understand, humanity's physical capabilities are quite alarming to many species. Your bone density alone exceeds ours by a factor of 5. Your muscular system operates at efficiency levels we consider impossible. The gravity you evolved under would crush most of us within hours." Marcus nodded slowly. He had read the reports. Earth was classified as a Category 14 extreme environment world, the harshest designation in collective records. The fact that intelligent life had evolved there had all defied most species' understanding of biology. "We appreciate your concerns," Marcus said. "Humanity wishes only peaceful cooperation. We will abide by whatever restrictions the collective deems necessary." Over the following weeks, those restrictions became painfully clear. Humans were designated as civilian class only. No military service, no security positions, no roles that might require physical confrontation. They were assigned to research stations, engineering projects, and diplomatic missions. Always supervised, always watched, always expected to hold back. Marcus found himself leading a xenobiology research team on Station Kepler 7. His colleagues were brilliant scientists from a dozen different species. They treated him with polite wariness, like a sophisticated predator that might revert to instinct at any moment. Sarah worked in the engineering section of a merchant fleet hub. She designed improved recycling systems and power distribution networks. Her ideas were revolutionary, showing an understanding of physics that most species had never considered. But she had to present each concept carefully, never moving too fast, never showing frustration when others took weeks to understand what she grasped in minutes. The collective functioned on consensus and caution. Decisions required extensive debate. Actions needed multiple layers of approval. Everything moved at a pace that made humans want to scream, but they smiled and nodded and pretended this was normal. 6 months became a year. More humans arrived, filling positions across collective space. They adapted to the slower pace, the lighter gravity, the careful social dynamics. They learned to hide their true nature behind practiced restraint. Marcus often met with other human researchers in private. They shared their frustrations over secure channels. Some advocated for demanding equal status, for proving humanity's capabilities. But the diplomatic corps insisted on patience. The collective needed time to become comfortable with Deathworlders in their midst. Then the reports started coming in. At first, they were minor incidents. A research outpost on the rim went silent. A merchant convoy disappeared between systems. The collective investigated but found nothing conclusive. Then an entire mining colony vanished. 3,000 inhabitants from various species gone without a trace. The station remained intact, but every living being had disappeared. No signs of struggle, no distress signals, nothing. Marcus attended an emergency council session as humanity's scientific representative. The chamber filled with worried voices and nervous movement. Species representatives demanded explanations, theories, anything to make sense of the impossible. Mediator Quillen called for order, his antennae drooping with stress. The evidence suggests an unknown force, he announced. Something capable of breaching our best defenses without triggering alarms. We have no reference for such technology. A tall, crystalline being spoke, its voice resonating through harmonic frequencies. Could this be the Void Swarm? The chamber went silent. Marcus had read about the Void Swarm in historical archives, an ancient enemy that had ravaged the galaxy centuries ago, then vanished. Most species considered them extinct or mythological. That is impossible, Quillen said, though his voice lacked certainty. The swarm was eradicated 300 years ago. Our ancestors made certain of it. But what if they returned? Sarah asked from the human section. What would your defenses look like against them? Quillen's skin paled further. Our weapons are designed for deterrence, not warfare. The collective has enjoyed peace for 2 centuries. We have security forces for police actions, nothing more. Our ships carry minimal armaments. We resolved long ago that military buildup led only to conflict. Marcus felt something cold settle in his stomach. And if this is the swarm, if they've returned in force, then we will evacuate threatened areas and petition them for negotiations, Quillen replied. All civilized species can be reasoned with. Marcus looked at Sarah. She stared back with the same realization. The collective had forgotten how to fight. They had built a civilization on peace and cooperation, which was admirable. But they had also made themselves defenseless against anything that didn't share their values. And if the Void Swarm had truly returned, the galaxy was about to remember what war meant. Humans sat in their quarters that night, connected across dozens of stations and ships. They discussed what they had heard in careful, coded language. They all knew what was coming. The collective would face an enemy it couldn't negotiate with, couldn't reason with, couldn't stop. And humanity would be forced to watch from the sidelines, bound by restrictions meant to protect everyone. Marcus stared out at the stars and wondered how long those restrictions would last once the killing started. The Shadow Swarm emerges. The attack came 3 weeks later. Station Meridian, home to 12,000 souls, sent a single fragmented message before going dark. Marcus watched the recording in the emergency council session, his hands gripping, the armrests hard enough to leave impressions in the soft material. The footage showed massive organic ships materializing from nowhere. They didn't use conventional drives or gates. They simply appeared, as if reality bent around them. The ships looked like they had been grown rather than built. Massive, chitinous, hulls covered in what might have been armor or skin, impossible to tell. Weapon ports opened like mouths, spewing streams of something that dissolved station shields in seconds. Then creatures poured out, filling the corridors. The camera caught glimpses before cutting out. Things that walked on too many legs, with bodies that seemed to shift and change. Faces that were mostly teeth. The Void Swarm had returned, and they had not forgotten how to kill. The collective's response was chaos. Security forces scrambled to evacuate stations in the outer rim. Defense platforms activated weapons that hadn't been fired in decades, many malfunctioning from lack of maintenance. Ships designed for patrol and ceremony tried to organize into battle formations they had never practiced. Sarah watched from the merchant hub as military vessels gathered. She counted their armaments with a sinking heart. Point defense lasers, meant for asteroids. Light plasma cannons designed to disable rather than destroy. Shields calibrated for solar radiation instead of weapons fire. They were going to die, and they didn't even understand how unprepared they were. The first major engagement happened at the Tertius Junction, a strategic crossroads between 5 systems. Collective forces numbered 80 ships, the largest military gathering in living memory. The swarm brought 30 vessels, each one larger than anything the collective had built. The battle lasted 11 minutes. Collective ships tried to maintain formation, firing in coordinated volleys as their ancient tactics required. The swarm scattered and swarmed, moving in patterns that defied physics. They targeted engines first, leaving ships crippled and helpless. Then they boarded, and the real horror began. Marcus received reports from survivors. The swarm creatures adapted during combat, changing their biology to counter weapons they encountered. Plasma burns healed in seconds. Energy shields were bypassed by creatures that phased through them. Boarding parties encountered nightmares that learned and evolved as they killed. Of the 80 collective ships, 3 escaped. The rest were consumed, their crews feeding the swarm's endless hunger. The galaxy reeled from the defeat. Panic spread across every settled world. Species that had never known fear learned it quickly. The collective council met in continuous session, debating strategies and solutions while the swarm advanced. Humans watched from their restricted positions, following reports, analyzing data, seeing patterns that others missed. The swarm attacked in waves, testing defenses, learning from each engagement. They targeted isolated stations first, building strength before hitting larger populations. Classic predator behavior. Marcus sent his analysis to the council. They thanked him politely and did nothing with the information. Sarah designed defensive modifications for stations, ways to harden hulls and improve shield efficiency. Her proposals were reviewed by committees that moved at a glacial pace. By the time they approved anything, the stations in question had already fallen. Tom Harrison worked in traffic control on Hub Station 17. He coordinated shipping routes and managed docking procedures. It was mind-numbingly boring work for someone who had commanded atmospheric fighters in Earth's Defense Force. But he followed protocols, smiled at his colleagues, and pretended this was fulfilling. Then the swarm hit Hub 17. Tom was monitoring sensor feeds when the organic ships materialized at the station's perimeter. Alarm screamed. His co-workers panicked, some fleeing, others freezing in terror. Tom's training kicked in automatically. He accessed the station's defense grid, primitive as it was. He rerouted power, prioritized targets, coordinated the few weapons platforms they had. His supervisor, a nervous Quillen named Desh, grabbed his arm. "What are you doing? You're not authorized for military systems." Tom shook him off with more force than he intended. Desh flew backward, hitting the wall hard. "No time for authorization. Either I fight or we all die." He worked the controls, designating targets, firing solutions, evasion patterns. The defense platforms responded sluggishly, but they responded. He managed to destroy 2 swarm fighters before they breached the shields. It wasn't enough. The swarm ships attached to the station hull like parasites. Cutting tools began opening holes. In minutes, they would be inside. Tom activated the emergency channels. "All personnel, this is traffic control. Swarm boarding imminent. Seal all sections. Arm yourselves with anything available. Prepare to repel boarders." He paused, then made a decision that would change everything. "All humans on station, lockdown protocols are suspended. You are authorized to defend this station by any means necessary." Across Hub 17, humans received the message. They looked at each other, sharing a moment of understanding. For a year they had pretended to be weak. They had moved carefully, spoken softly, hidden their true nature. That ended now. Dr. Jennifer Walsh worked in the medical section. She was treating a patient when the message came through. She finished her work quickly, then went to the supply room. Behind the medical equipment, she found what she was looking for. A maintenance toolbox. She pulled out a heavy wrench weighing maybe 15 pounds. To most species, it would be unwieldable. To Jennifer, it felt light. She tested the swing and smiled. It had been too long. The swarm creatures burst through the hull in Medical Section 3. They poured in like insects, all teeth and claws and alien hunger. The staff screamed and ran. Jennifer stood her ground. The first creature lunged at her. She sidestepped, faster than anything in the collective moved. Her wrench came down on its skull with Earth gravity strength behind it. The thing's head cracked. It collapsed. The other creatures paused, confused. This wasn't normal prey behavior. Jennifer attacked. She moved through them like a dancer. Every motion economical and brutal. The wrench broke bodies, crushed limbs, ended lives. The creatures tried to adapt, changing their biology to counter her attacks, but they couldn't adapt fast enough. They had never fought something that evolved on a death world, that was forged by gravity and predators and millions of years of survival pressure. In 3 minutes, Jennifer stood among 15 dead swarm creatures. She was breathing hard but uninjured. Her co-workers stared at her like she had become something else. Maybe she had. Similar scenes played out across the station. Humans took positions at choke points and held them. They used makeshift weapons, their own strength, their understanding of violence that civilized species had forgotten. The swarm had never encountered resistance like this. They lost more creatures boarding Hub 17 than they had in the previous 5 attacks combined. Tom coordinated the defense from traffic control. He directed humans to weak points, rerouted environmental systems to trap swarm creatures in airlocks, vented sections to space when the enemy concentrated there. He fought like he had been trained to fight, with ruthless efficiency and tactical brilliance. When collective security forces finally arrived, they found the station heavily damaged but intact. The swarm had been repelled, and everywhere they looked, they saw humans standing among piles of dead creatures covered in alien blood, wearing expressions of grim satisfaction. Mediator Quillen arrived on the next transport. He walked through the station's corridors, seeing the evidence of battle. He found Tom in traffic control writing an after-action report. The Mediator's antennae trembled. "What have you done?" Tom looked up at him calmly. "We survived. That's what Deathworlders do. We survive. But you exceeded your authority. You violated the civilian designation. You used force." Tom stood slowly. His full height and mass suddenly seemed threatening in the low gravity. "You want to debate regulations while the galaxy burns? Fine, court-martial me. Restrict me. Do whatever makes you feel better. But that swarm is coming back, and next time there might not be any humans around to save you." Quillen had no response. He left the station shaken, his worldview fundamentally altered. Humans weren't the careful, restrained beings they had pretended to be. They were warriors hiding in civilian clothing, and the galaxy had just seen what happened when those warriors stopped pretending. The reports from Hub 17 spread through the collective within hours. Fear mixed with something else now. Hope, perhaps. The swarm could be fought. The question was whether the collective would swallow its pride and fear long enough to let Deathworlders show them how. Breaking the chains. The emergency session of the Stellar Collective Council was the largest gathering in their history. Every species sent representatives. Every system demanded answers. The chamber buzzed with dozens of languages and translation devices, creating a cacophony of fear and desperation. Marcus stood in the human delegation section, watching the chaos. Beside him, Sarah checked data on her tablet, her expression hard. They both knew what was coming. The collective had a choice: adapt or die. Mediator Quillen called for order, his voice amplified through the chamber's acoustics. "The situation is unprecedented. The Void Swarm has destroyed 47 stations and colonies in 6 weeks. Our casualties exceed 2 million souls. Our military forces have proven inadequate. We must consider drastic measures." A reptilian delegate from the Sorin Confederacy spoke, her scales shifting to an angry red. "What measures? We have deployed every available ship. We have evacuated entire systems. Nothing stops them. They adapt to our weapons, they learn from our tactics. This enemy cannot be fought with conventional means. Then we negotiate, a floating jellyfish-like being suggested. The swarm must have demands, motivations. All intelligent species can be reasoned with." "They're not intelligent in the way you understand," Marcus said, his voice cutting through the discussion. All eyes turned to him. "The swarm operates on hive logic. They don't negotiate because they don't see you as equals. They see you as resources, food, biological material, nothing more. That's how apex predators think." "You speak as if you understand predation," Quillen said carefully. "Humanity does understand it," Sarah replied, standing beside Marcus. "We lived with it for 300,000 years. We were prey before we became predators. We learned to fight, to hunt, to kill. It's encoded in our biology, our psychology, our entire existence. And that's why you restricted us," Marcus added. "Because you saw what we were capable of and it terrified you." The chamber filled with uncomfortable murmurs. A crystalline delegate spoke, its voice chiming. "Are you suggesting humanity could defeat the swarm where we have failed?" "I'm suggesting we could help," Marcus said. but not under current restrictions. You've neutered us, forced us to suppress everything that makes us effective. You wanted peaceful civilians, fine, we gave you that. But now you need warriors and you won't let us be what we are. The Soren delegate leaned forward. What exactly are you proposing, human? Sarah activated a holographic display. This is Earth's combat doctrine. Full-spectrum warfare across multiple domains. We don't just fight in space. We fight in atmospheres, on surfaces, in environmental extremes that would kill most of you. We understand combined arms tactics, guerrilla warfare, strategic targeting. We've spent our entire history perfecting violence. The hologram showed human military operations, soldiers moving through hostile terrain, ships executing aggressive maneuvers, weapon systems designed for maximum lethality. The collective representatives watched in stunned silence. This is barbaric, someone whispered. No, Marcus corrected. This is survival. Your civilization forgot how to fight because you've had peace for so long. That's admirable. But the swarm doesn't care about your values. They care about consumption. You can either let us help or you can go extinct debating ethics. Quillen's antennae drooped. What do you require? Full military authorization for all humans in collective space, Sarah said. We need access to your weapon systems, your ships, your defensive infrastructure. We need permission to retrofit everything using our engineering standards. And we need command authority in combat situations. You're asking us to surrender our military to an alien species, the Soren delegate said. We're asking you to trust us, Marcus replied. You brought us into this collective. You wanted our knowledge, our skills. Now you get all of it, not just the parts that make you comfortable. The debate raged for hours. Conservative delegates argued against giving humans power. Progressive voices countered that extinction was the alternative. Security analysts presented data from Hub 17, showing human effectiveness against swarm forces. Finally, Quillen called for a vote. The motion was simple. Grant humanity full military integration and command authority during the swarm crisis. The votes came in slowly. Green lights for approval, red for denial. The tally climbed. Marcus watched the display, knowing this decision would define the galaxy's future. The final count appeared. 62% approval. It was enough. Quillen's voice trembled as he spoke. The motion passes. Humanity is granted emergency military authority. May the ancient spirits help us all. Marcus allowed himself a small smile. You won't regret this. I hope you're right, Quillen replied. Because if you fail, there will be nothing left to regret. Within hours, the transformation began. Every human in collective space received the authorization codes. The restrictions lifted. For the first time in over a year, they could be themselves. No more careful movements, no more suppressed strength, no more pretending. Colonel David Chen, Sarah's brother, arrived on the first military transport from Earth. He brought with him 5,000 combat veterans and enough equipment to outfit twice that many. He met with collective military commanders on Sanctuary Prime, laying out human tactical doctrine. The aliens listened with growing horror and fascination. Acceptable casualty rates, strategic retreat, scorched earth tactics, sacrificial rear guards. Every concept violated collective military philosophy. Your people don't fight like this, one commander objected. We fight to win, David replied. Sometimes that requires sacrifice. Sometimes you lose ships, soldiers, entire battles, but you keep fighting until you achieve strategic victory. That's the difference between civilized warfare and survival warfare. You're asking us to become monsters. David's expression hardened. The swarm are the monsters. We're just the things that hunt monsters. Training began immediately. Human soldiers worked with collective forces, teaching aggressive tactics and close-quarters combat. The aliens struggled at first. Their physiology wasn't designed for violent confrontation, but humans showed them how to use technology to compensate, how to leverage advantages, how to think like predators. Sarah led the engineering retrofit program. She commandeered repair facilities and production lines, implementing emergency modifications to collective ships, reinforced hulls, upgraded weapons, redundant systems. She pushed workers around the clock, ignoring protests about safety margins and testing protocols. There's no time for caution, she told her teams. The swarm won't wait for us to be ready. Marcus coordinated intelligence operations. He analyzed swarm attack patterns, predicted their movements, identified vulnerabilities. His team included xenobiologists, tactical analysts, and combat veterans. They worked in rotating shifts, building a comprehensive understanding of the enemy. Jennifer Walsh, the doctor who had fought on Hub 17, found herself training medical personnel. She taught them battlefield triage, how to treat injuries while under fire, how to keep functioning through trauma. Her students were horrified at first, then gradually accepting. They were learning that medicine in wartime was different from medicine in peace. Tom Harrison took command of a mixed fleet of humans and collective forces. His flagship was a retrofitted collective cruiser, now bristling with human weapons and armor. He drilled his crew relentlessly, running combat simulations that tested their limits. The collective officers complained. The exercises were too aggressive, too demanding, too stressful. Tom was unmoved. War is stressful. Get used to it. The first real test came 4 weeks after authorization. The swarm attacked a major colony world called Helios Prime, home to 30 million inhabitants. Intelligence predicted the assault 3 days in advance, giving Tom time to position his fleet. This would be different from previous engagements. This time humans would set the terms. The swarm arrived as expected, their organic ships materializing in a cloud around the planet. They outnumbered Tom's fleet 3-1, standard swarm tactics, but this time the defenders didn't panic. They didn't try to negotiate, they attacked. Human ships accelerated to combat speed, moving faster than collective vessels had ever dared. They didn't maintain formation. They scattered and struck from multiple angles, targeting swarm ships' weak points that Marcus's intelligence team had identified. Point defense systems fired in coordinated patterns, creating kill zones that shredded swarm fighters. The swarm tried to adapt, changing tactics, evolving defenses. But humans adapted faster. Tom directed his fleet like a conductor, each ship playing its part in a symphony of destruction. When swarm vessels tried to board, they found armored marines waiting. When they tried to overwhelm with numbers, they met focused fire that prioritized threats. The battle lasted 6 hours. When it ended, 70% of the swarm force was destroyed. The remainder fled, something collective forces had never seen them do. Tom's fleet had taken casualties. 8 ships destroyed, hundreds of personnel dead or wounded. But Helios Prime survived and the colonists were safe. The victory was broadcast across the entire collective. For the first time since the swarm returned, people felt hope. Humans had shown them something they had forgotten. That predators could be beaten by better predators. That violence could be met with greater violence. That survival sometimes required becoming what you feared. Quillen watched the battle recordings in his private chambers. He saw human ships moving with aggressive precision. He saw soldiers fighting with brutal efficiency. He saw the calculating intelligence behind every decision. These were not the restrained civilians humanity had presented. These were apex predators unleashed, and Quillen realized with absolute certainty that the galaxy would never be the same. The question wasn't whether humans could save the collective. The question was what the collective would become once Deathworlders were done reshaping it. The Deathworld Doctrine. The command center on Sanctuary Prime hummed with constant activity. Holographic displays showed fleet positions across 40 systems. Communication channels carried reports from hundreds of stations. And at the center of it all, Colonel David Chen stood before a gathering of collective military leadership, presenting what humans called the Deathworld Doctrine. "We've been fighting defensively for 8 weeks," David began, highlighting areas on the strategic map. "The swarm attacks, we respond. They choose the battlefields, we react. This stops now. We're taking the offensive." The assembled commanders shifted uncomfortably. A Saran admiral spoke, her scales showing uncertainty through color shifts. "Offensive operations? We don't have the forces to invade swarm territory." "That's the fundamental flaw in your thinking," David replied. "You're trying to fight a conventional war, holding territory, maintaining supply lines, achieving strategic objectives. The swarm doesn't think that way. They're a biological force. They go where the food is. So we become poisonous food." He pulled up new tactical overlays. "We identify their target priorities: high population worlds, resource-rich systems, key infrastructure. Then we set traps. We make every victory cost them more than it's worth. We hurt them until attacking collective space becomes more trouble than it's worth." A crystalline commander chimed skeptically. "The swarm has billions of organisms. They can absorb losses we cannot." "That's true in a straight numbers game," Sarah interjected, joining the briefing. "But we're not playing their game." Humans introduced a concept called asymmetric warfare thousands of years ago. You don't fight the enemy's strength. You target their weaknesses. She brought up biological data. The swarm operates through a hive mind. Individual organisms are controlled by larger node creatures. Those nodes coordinate through pheromone signals and biological networks. Kill enough nodes, you disrupt entire swarms. Marcus added his analysis. We've identified 3 classes of node organisms: warriors that lead combat groups, coordinators that manage logistics, and architects that direct construction and adaptation. Each class has specific biological markers. We can target them selectively. The collective commanders looked at the data. Decades of peaceful philosophy pushed against brutal pragmatism. Finally, the Saran admiral spoke. How do you propose to implement this doctrine? David smiled without humor. We're already implementing it. Lieutenant Commander Maria Santos commands the stealth corvette Shadowrunner. Her ship was one of 50 human vessels specially designed for covert operations. Unlike collective ships that broadcast their presence for safety, Shadowrunner was built to disappear. Her mission was simple in concept, nightmarish in execution. Insert a strike team behind swarm lines, sabotage their staging areas, extract before getting overwhelmed. Maria's crew numbered 20 humans. All volunteers, all veterans of Earth's Special Operations Forces. They dropped out of faster-than-light travel in a debris field near a swarm-held system. Passive sensors detected massive biological activity. Hundreds of swarm ships clustered around a stripped mining world, feeding on whatever resources remained. That's our target, Maria said, highlighting a massive structure on the planet's surface. Swarm Hive Nexus. Intelligence says it's coordinating operations for this entire sector. We take it out, we disrupt at least 30 active swarms. Her tactical officer, Jake Morrison, pulled up infiltration routes. We can use the asteroid field for cover. Drop to the surface in stealth pods. 6-hour window before they notice us. Maria nodded. Then we blow the Nexus and get out. Simple. Jake grinned. Nothing's ever simple. The insertion went according to plan. 6 pods dropped through the planet's atmosphere, landing in a rocky wasteland 10 kilometers from the hive structure. The team assembled quickly, checking weapons and equipment. They wore armor that incorporated collective shield technology with human durability standards. Each soldier carried weapons designed specifically for swarm biology. Plasma cutters to sever node connections, biological disruptors to trigger cellular collapse, and good old-fashioned explosives. They moved across the barren landscape like ghosts. Years of training on Earth's harshest environments prepared them for anything alien worlds could offer. This planet's thin atmosphere and toxic composition barely registered as an obstacle. The hive structure loomed ahead, a massive organic construct that pulsed with bioluminescence. Swarm creatures moved around it in coordinated patterns. Thousands of them, maybe tens of thousands. Jake set up observation. He counted warrior classes, identified patrol patterns, marked weak points in the perimeter. We've got a problem, he reported. The density is higher than intelligence predicted. We'll never reach the core undetected. Then we don't stay undetected, Maria decided. Team Alpha, you're the distraction. Draw them off to the eastern perimeter. Team Bravo, we go in fast and hard through the western entrance. Set charges, collapse the structure, extract through the northern route. Alpha Team Leader, Sergeant Chen Wei, accepted the assignment without hesitation. His squad consisted of 5 humans who had trained together for years. They positioned themselves on a ridge overlooking the eastern side. Chen Wei armed a cluster of remote explosives. On my mark, he said. 3, 2, 1 mark. The explosions tore through a swarm staging area. Creatures died instantly. Others rushed toward the disturbance away from the main structure. Chen Wei's team opened fire, their weapons cutting through swarm warriors with practiced efficiency. The creatures screamed and charged. Alpha Team fell back in a fighting retreat, leading the swarm away from Bravo's infiltration route. Maria's team sprinted toward the western entrance. They encountered minimal resistance, most of the defenders having been drawn to Alpha's position. The entrance was a sphincter-like opening that contracted at their approach. Sarah planted a breaching charge. The explosion blasted through the organic barrier and they poured inside. The hive's interior was nightmarish. Walls that breathed, floors that pulsed, corridors that seemed to shift. Bioluminescent growth provided eerie lighting, and everywhere swarm organisms moved with purpose. Bravo Team fought through them, pushing deeper into the structure. They followed Marcus's intelligence data, navigating toward the central nexus. Behind them, alarms began to sound. If alarms were biological screams that echoed through living walls. The swarm knew they were here now. Time became critical. They reached the nexus chamber. a vast space where dozens of node creatures clustered around a central organism the size of a building. This was the architect, the intelligence directing this entire operation. Maria armed the thermobaric devices her team carried. These weren't standard collective weapons. Humans had designed them specifically for this mission, calibrated to trigger a cascade failure in swarm biology. Plant them around the perimeter, she ordered. Full dispersal pattern. We've got 3 minutes. Her team moved with brutal efficiency, placing charges, setting timers, covering each other's positions. Swarm warriors poured into the chamber, but they were met with concentrated fire. Humans had learned on a death world how to hold a position against overwhelming numbers. You didn't panic. You selected targets, conserved ammunition, trusted your training. The last charge was placed with 30 seconds to spare. Bravo team ran for the exit, fighting through increasing resistance. Behind them, the charges detonated simultaneously. The thermobaric weapons created a pressure wave that liquefied swarm biology in a chain reaction. The Nexus organism collapsed. Node creatures died in seconds. The entire hive structure began to fail. Maria's team burst out of the western entrance just as the building-sized organism inside exploded. The blast wave threw them forward. They rolled, came up running, and sprinted for the extraction point. Behind them, thousands of swarm creatures lost coordination. Some collapsed, others attacked each other. The hive-mind connection had been severed. Alpha Team reached the extraction point first, having successfully led the swarm garrison away from the primary mission. Chenwei did a quick count. All 5 members present and alive, though everyone carried injuries. Bravo Team arrived moments later. Maria was bleeding from a deep cut across her forehead, but she was grinning. Charges successful. Target destroyed. Above them, Shadowrunner dropped from orbit, weapons blazing to cover their evacuation. The team piled into the extraction pods and launched, leaving the dying hive behind them. The mission had taken 6 hours and 20 minutes. Acceptable margins. Back on Sanctuary Prime, collective commanders watched the mission recordings in silence. They saw humans operating behind enemy lines with a casual competence that seemed impossible. They saw soldiers fighting through impossible odds without hesitation. They saw what Deathworld evolution produced. The Soren Admiral spoke quietly. "How many teams like this do you have?" David's expression was carefully neutral. 50 active, another 100 in training, and they're all volunteers. The commanders absorbed this information. One human team had destroyed a major swarm coordination nexus. 50 such teams could devastate swarm operations across multiple sectors. The crystalline commander chimed thoughtfully. "This changes the strategic balance. If we can't match them in numbers, we make every swarm operation costly and unpredictable." David nodded. "Now you're thinking like humans. Don't fight the war they want. Fight the war you can win." Over the following months, the Deathworld doctrine proved itself repeatedly. Human strike teams hit swarm infrastructure across dozens of systems. Mixed fleets using aggressive tactics stopped advances that should have been unstoppable. Collective forces learned to fight with something they had forgotten: ruthless pragmatism. The swarm began to change their behavior. They avoided systems with known human presence. They allocated more resources to defense instead of offense. For the first time since returning, they were adapting to prey that fought back. But the cost was heavy. Human casualties mounted. Every mission, every battle, every engagement claimed lives. Collective species watched with complicated emotions as humans paid the price for defending the galaxy. Some felt grateful. Others felt guilty. All of them understood that Deathworlders were teaching them something fundamental. Survival wasn't about being the strongest or most advanced. It was about being too stubborn to quit, too adaptable to predict, and too dangerous to ignore. And humanity, forged by a world that tried to kill them every day, had learned those lessons better than anyone. Comment for next part.